Assalamu alaikum students, hope you all are fine. In our previous class we have started the gross anatomy of white matter of the spinal cord, and so far we have studied that the white column is divided into three parts: the anterior white column, lateral white column and posterior white column. Then we have discussed that all the fibers or axons which are present in the white column, they are arranged in the form of tracts, and we have divided the tracts into two parts: ascending tracts and descending tracts. So we were discussing the tracts which are present in the anterolateral column, and so far we have done the ventral and dorsal spinocerebellar tracts, anterior and lateral spinothalamic tracts, and spinotectal tract. The next is spinoreticular tract. In spinoreticular tract, the first order neurons are again the dorsal root ganglion. The axons of neurons which are present in the dorsal root ganglion enter the spinal cord at posterior gray column, where they terminate at some unknown second order neurons. Then axons from these second order neurons ascend the spinal cord as spinoreticular tract in the lateral white column, where it is mixed with lateral spinothalamic tract. Please remember that most of the fibers in spinoreticular tract are uncrossed. So this is uncrossed tract. These fibers terminate by synapsing with neurons of the reticular formation, and as you know, the reticular formation is present throughout brainstem. So these fibers will terminate in the nuclei present in medulla oblongata, pons and midbrain. The spinoreticular tract provides an afferent pathway for the reticular formation, which plays an important role in influencing levels of consciousness. In this diagram, we can see the spinoreticular tract in this black color. When the axon enters from dorsal root ganglion, the next fibers pass uncrossed on the same side of the spinal cord, and then they terminate at different levels within brainstem. Spino-olivary tract. The first order neurons in this tract are again present in the posterior root ganglion, and axons of the neurons terminate on unknown second order neurons in the posterior gray column. Then axons from the second order neurons cross the midline and ascend as spino-olivary tract in the white matter at the junction of anterior and lateral columns on the contralateral side. The axons end by synapsing on third order neurons, and in this case the third order neurons are present in the inferior olivary nucleus, and this nucleus is present in the medulla oblongata. So unlike other ascending tracts where the third order neurons are present in the ventroposterolateral nucleus of the thalamus, in this case the third order neurons are present in the inferior olivary nucleus in the medulla oblongata. The axons which arise from these third order neurons in the inferior olivary nucleus again cross the midline and then enter the cerebellum. So two times crossing होती है, once in the spinal cord and then again in the medulla oblongata to reach the cerebellum. As we know that cerebellum controls on the ipsilateral side of the body. This tract conveys information to the cerebellum from cutaneous and proprioceptive organs. In this diagram, we can see the spino-olivary tract, which fibers cross to opposite side and then ascend and terminate in the inferior olivary nucleus. From here the next order fibers recross and enter the cerebellum through inferior cerebellar peduncle. Now, very important tracts which are present in the dorsal column or posterior column of the white matter. These tracts are called dorsal column tracts, or they are also called dorsal column medial lemniscal system. It consists of fasciculus gracilis and cuneatus. The receptors for the dorsal column or posterior column tracts are muscle spindles, tendon organs, Meissner's and Pacinian's corpuscles. The axons enter the spinal cord again from the posterior root ganglion, and the difference in this is that they do not synapse, they do not terminate in the posterior gray column, rather they pass directly to posterior white column. This point is important, that axons enter the spinal cord from posterior root ganglion, pass directly to posterior white column of the same side. Axons divide into ascending and short descending branches. Now these are the axons which enter at different levels of the spinal cord. The short descending branches pass down variable number of segments and giving off collateral branches that synapse with cells in the posterior gray column, with internuncial neurons and with anterior horn cells. These short descending fibers are actually involved with intersegmental reflexes. Many of the long ascending fibers travel upward in the posterior white column as fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus. But remember that fasciculus gracilis is present medially in the posterior white column throughout the length of spinal cord, while fasciculus cuneatus is situated laterally and it starts at 6th thoracic segment of the spinal cord. So fasciculus cuneatus is present in upper thoracic and cervical segments of the spinal cord only, and it is separated from the fasciculus gracilis by a septum. Now the fibers of both tracts, they ascend ipsilaterally and terminate by synapsing on second order neurons. Now where these second order neurons are located, they are present in the medulla oblongata. Unlike the other tracts we have discussed where the second order neurons are present in the posterior gray column, in posterior column tracts the second order neurons are present in the nucleus gracilis and nucleus cuneatus, which are present in the medulla oblongata. The medial one is nucleus gracilis while the lateral is nucleus cuneatus. Now the axons of the second order neurons, the fibers of first order neurons terminate here, and then the axons of second order neurons, they cross at this level and in the central gray matter, and these crossing fibers are called internal arcuate fibers, and this decussation is called major sensory decussation. And after the decussation, the fibers will ascend as a single compact bundle. That bundle is called medial lemniscus. So the two things are different in case of posterior column tracts. The one is that the fibers do not synapse in the posterior gray column, rather they ascend ipsilaterally on the same side, and the second order neurons are located in the medulla oblongata. Now this is medial lemniscus. Medial lemniscus then passes through the upper part of medulla oblongata, then pons, and midbrain, and then the fibers terminate by synapsing on the third order neurons in the ventroposterolateral nucleus of the thalamus. From here again, the projection fibers which pass through corona radiata, and they will finally terminate into somatosensory area in the post-central gyrus. So in this diagram we can see the whole of the pathway of these dorsal column tracts, and we can see the fasciculus gracilis which is present medially, and fasciculus cuneatus which is present laterally, and fasciculus cuneatus starts at the sixth thoracic segment of the spinal cord. The dorsal column tracts carry proprioception, that is the muscle joint sense, and fine touch and 2-point discrimination and vibration sensations to the cerebral cortex. Few of the important points which you must remember. The posterior white column is purely sensory. It consists of only sensory tracts, the fasciculus gracilis and fasciculus cuneatus. There is no descending tract in the posterior white column, right? The next is fasciculus gracilis and cuneatus carry conscious proprioception to cerebral cortex, while unconscious proprioception goes to cerebellum through ventral and dorsal spinocerebellar tracts, as we have discussed in our last lecture. The fasciculus cuneatus starts at the sixth thoracic spinal segment, while the fasciculus gracilis is present throughout the length of spinal cord. The second order neurons are not present in the posterior gray column, rather they are present in medulla oblongata. Then what is medial lemniscus? The axons of second order neurons, which are called internal arcuate fibers, they decussate, and after decussation these fibers ascend as single compact bundle called medial lemniscus. Now lesions of the dorsal column tracts. As these tracts carry proprioception, vibration and 2-point discrimination, the destruction of these tracts cut off the supply of information from the muscles and joint to consciousness. Means the individual does not know about the position and movement of the ipsilateral limbs below the level of the lesion, because the fibers of the tract are present on the ipsilateral side throughout the length of spinal cord, and they decussate in the medulla oblongata. That's why in case of lesion of tract in the spinal cord, the findings will be on the ipsilateral side. When the patient eyes closed, he or she is unable to tell where the limb or part of limb is present in the space. For example, if you passively dorsiflex the patient big toe, he or she is not able to tell you whether the toe is pointing upward or it is downward. Then there is also loss of vibration sense, which can simply be tested with the help of tuning fork when it is pressed against some bony prominence such as lateral malleolus of the fibula or the styloid process of the radius. There is also loss of 2-point discrimination. The 2-point discrimination, the 2 points have to be separated for some distance so they can be recognized as 2 separate points. So this sensation of 2-point discrimination is also lost in case of the lesions of dorsal column tracts, but the general sense of light touch would be unaffected because these impulses ascend in the anterior spinothalamic tracts. So this was all about the ascending tracts in the spinal cord. Now we will discuss the blood supply of the spinal cord. Spinal cord receives its arterial supply from vertebral artery. As you all know, vertebral artery arises from the subclavian artery on each side. It enters the cranial cavity through foramen magnum along with other structures. Within cranial cavity, it runs on the anterolateral surface of the medulla oblongata until it reaches the junction between pons and medulla oblongata, where the two vertebral arteries join and form a single basilar artery. So the spinal cord receives its blood supply from one anterior spinal artery, two posterior spinal arteries, which arise from the vertebral artery, and other than there are segmental arteries. Remember that all major arteries lie in the subarachnoid space. There is single anterior spinal artery which is formed by a branch arise from each side from the vertebral artery, and there are two posterior spinal arteries, one on each side. Anterior spinal artery is formed by the union of two arteries, each of which arises from the vertebral artery inside the skull. The anterior spinal artery descends on the anterior surface of spinal cord in the anterior median fissure. Now this is anterior spinal artery. The branches from the anterior spinal artery enter the substance of spinal cord, where they supply the anterior 2/3 of the spinal cord. Posterior spinal arteries are two. On each side, the posterior spinal artery either arises directly from the vertebral artery inside the skull, or sometimes it may arises from posterior inferior cerebellar artery. Each artery descends on the posterior surface of the spinal cord close to posterior nerve roots and give off branches that supply posterior 1/3 of the spinal cord. So anterior 2/3 by anterior spinal artery and posterior 1/3 of the spinal cord is supplied by the posterior spinal arteries. The spinal arteries, the anterior and posterior spinal arteries, they are not sufficient to supply the whole length of spinal cord. So blood supply is augmented by segmental arteries. The segmental arteries are branches of arteries which run outside the vertebral column, like deep cervical artery in the cervical region, intercostal arteries in the thoracic region, and lumbar arteries in the upper lumbar region. So these are the branches from segmental arteries are the branches from these arteries. They enter the vertebral canal through intervertebral foramen, where each of the segmental artery divide into anterior and posterior radicular arteries. So the anterior and posterior radicular arteries accompany the anterior and posterior nerve roots to the spinal cord, and these branches augment the blood supply of the spinal cord. In this diagram, we can see the blood supply of spinal cord as a whole. These are two vertebral arteries which join to form the basilar artery. Then one branch from each side of the vertebral artery join to form the anterior spinal artery, and this anterior spinal artery which runs on the anterior median fissure. And then these are the segmental arteries which arise from the deep cervical artery, then in the thoracic region from the posterior intercostal artery, then from the lumbar artery, then they form anterior and posterior radicular arteries and they supply the spinal cord. Then there are few feeder arteries the number and size of these arteries vary considerably from one individual to another. The one large and important feeder artery is great anterior medullary artery of Adam Kivish, arises from the aorta in the lower thoracic or upper lumbar vertebral levels. It is unilateral and in majority of cases it enters the spinal cord from left side. This artery is important and it is a major source of blood to the lower two-thirds of the spinal cord. In this diagram we can see the origin of this artery from aorta, from thoracic aorta, and it enters the vertebral canal on left side, and it reinforces the blood supply in the lower part of the spinal cord. Then there are some weak areas in the territory of arteries which are at risk or vulnerable to ischemia. In the upper and lower thoracic segments of the spinal cord, especially from fourth thoracic to first lumbar segment, the anterior spinal artery may be extremely small. The posterior spinal arteries are small in the upper thoracic region, the first, second, and third thoracic segments of the spinal cord. And these areas of the spinal cord are vulnerable to ischemia when there is segmental or radicular arteries in this region are occluded. Then venous drainage of the spinal cord. The veins draining the spinal cord are arranged in the form of 6 anastomosing longitudinal channels. These are anteromedian and posteromedian, which are single, pair of anterolateral and posterolateral veins. So these are total 6 veins which are arranged in the form of longitudinal channels. These channels are interconnected by a plexus of veins called venous vasocorona. So these vessels form anastomosis, which is called venous vasocorona. The blood from these veins drain into radicular veins. Now these are radicular veins which accompany the radicular arteries and anterior and posterior branches of the spinal nerve. These radicular veins open into internal vertebral plexus which is present between the dura mater and vertebral canal, and then these radicular veins drain into various segmental veins. So this is all about the blood supply of spinal cord. Thank you so much.